Hello and welcome back to Rabbit Reads, where we are on Chapter 6 of Skulduggery Pleasant, Playing with Fire, entitled Fireballs in the Park. Valkyrie woke early. She took a pebble from her bedside table and sat it on the floor, across her legs. The pebble was flat and smooth in her hand. She focused on it like Skulduggery had taught her. She focused until she could feel the air on her skin, and she focused on how it all connected. Slowly the pebble began to rise off her palm, held aloft by the air itself. A part of her still thrilled to see this, but she kept that part of her subdued. To use magic, she couldn't afford to let anything ruin her calm. And then that voice drifted up the stairs like a whine of dentist drills, and the pebble fell back into her hand, muttering to herself. Valkyrie stood up and walked into the bathroom, her practice done for the day. She took a shower, then pulled on her school uniform before heading down to the kitchen. Her mother was there, and sitting beside her was Valkyrie's shrill, sharp-featured Aunt Beryl. "Morning," Valkyrie said as she passed them, going straight for the cupboard. "Hi, love." "Hi, love." "Good morning, Stephanie," Beryl said primly. "Beryl," Valkyrie said in greeting. How is school going for you?" Valkyrie poured some cereal into her bowl and added milk. She didn't bother sitting. "It's okay." "Are you studying hard? My girls are always studying. They get it from my side of the family, I have to say. It's a valuable work ethic if I've installed in them." Valkyrie murmured and scooped a spoonful of cereal into her mouth, doubting the validity of just about everything Beryl had just said. Her aunt didn't like her, and Valkyrie didn't like her aunt. Her aunt didn't like her because Valkyrie had inherited her late uncle's estate, and Valkyrie didn't like her aunt or her aunt's husband, Fergus, because they were dislikable people. Her father came in, dressed in smart trousers, vest, and a tie around his bare neck. He winked at Valkyrie, then noticed his sister-in-law. "Beryl," he said, utterly failing to hide his dismay. "Desmond, good morning." "Beryl, what are you doing here? It's not even 8 o'clock. You know, I don't like seeing you before I've had my first cup of coffee." Beryl laughed that hideous fake laugh of hers. "Oh, Desmond, you're such a messer. I'm just here to talk to Melissa, that's all. We've got a lot to organize for tomorrow night." "Oh, dear God, the family reunion thing." "It'll be wonderful." "But you'll be there," her dad said, puzzled, and Valkyrie nearly choked on her cereal. Her mum looked up at him. "You forgot your shirt." "Oh, yes, the reason I'm here. I don't have a clean one." "Behind the door." He turned, saw the crisp white shirt hanging on the coat hook, and rubbed his hands together. He took it off the hook and put it on, sliding the collar up beneath the tie as he buttoned it. He didn't like wearing ties. He owned a construction company, so he always thought he'd be in work boots and jeans. But every now and then he had to dress up and pretend, as he put it, to be civilized. "So, Steph," he said, looking forward to a great day in school. "Oh, yes," she said with mocking enthusiasm. "What do you think you'll learn today?" "I can't begin to guess. Maybe how to subtract." He waved his hand dismissively. "Subtraction's overrated. It's like adding, only backwards. You're not even going to need it." "Desmond," Beryl said sternly, "you shouldn't take that attitude. Stephanie is at an easily influenced age, and she needs to be taught that everything she learns in school is valuable. Joking around is all well and good, but some things just have to be taken seriously. How can you ever expect Stephanie to be responsible when all you ever do is set a bad example?" "I don't know," he answered. "Luck, I suppose." Beryl sighed in exasperation and looked like she was about to give them a lecture. Valkyrie and her father both pounced on the same opportunity before Beryl could utter a word. "I'm going to school," Valkyrie said quickly, shoveling the last spoonful of cereal into her mouth. "I'm going to work," her dad said, only a millisecond behind. Valkyrie slipped her bowl into the dishwasher and made for the door. "But Desmond, you haven't had any breakfast," Valkyrie's mother said with a frown. "I'll get something on the way," her father said, following her out. They got to the hallway, and Valkyrie turned for the stairs as her dad picked his keys off the small table. They looked at each other and nodded their silent goodbyes. Then they both smiled, and he walked out, and she went to her room. Not for the first time, she wondered how her father would react if he knew that the family legends were true, that they were descendants from the ancients, that his grandfather and his late brother had been right. But she didn't tell him. If he knew the truth, he'd try and stop her from going out every day, try to protect her from people like Serpine and Vengius, and whoever else wanted to kill her. Or worse, maybe he'd want to get involved. She didn't think she'd be able to cope with her father putting himself in danger. She wanted her family to be normal. Normal was good. Normal was safe. She closed the door, then took off her school jumper and dropped it on the bed. She touched her mirror, and a moment later her reflection stepped out. She had forgotten about the logo rule once, and the reflection had gone to school with the school crest on the wrong side and the school motto written backwards. Valkyrie hadn't made that mistake again. She waited until her reflection had pulled on the jumper, then handed it her school bag. "Have fun," she said, and the reflection nodded and hurried out of the room. Not for the first time, Valkyrie grinned to herself. She'd hardly been to school since Skulduggery had worked his magic on that mirror. Yet she was up to date on all the classes, all the gossip, all the day-to-day workings of an ordinary, everyday, run-of-the-mill 13-year-old, without having to actually set foot through a classroom door. Sure, there were times when she'd wished she'd been there to experience something firsthand instead of reliving it through the reflection's eyes. It wasn't the same merely having the memories of, say, a joke being told, instead of actually having been around for the real thing. Just another price to pay, she reckoned. Moving quietly, Valkyrie took off the rest of her uniform, hid it under her bed, and dressed in the black clothes that had been made especially for her. She'd grown a bit since Ghastly Bespoke had designed them, but they still fit, and for that she was thankful. They had saved her life on more than one occasion, and it wasn't as if she could ask Ghastly to make her any more. In a fight with the White Cleaver, he had used the Earth Power as a last-ditch defense and turned himself to stone. She hadn't known him that well, but she missed him, and she knew that Skulduggery did too. She slipped into her coat and opened the window. She breathed deep and slow, checking to make sure she wasn't being watched. She climbed out onto the sill and paused there for a moment, focusing her mind. Then she slipped off the edge, displacing the air beneath her to slow her descent. It wasn't graceful, and her landing was still a little too hard, but it was a lot better than it had been. She hurried down the road to the pier. When she was younger, she used to join her friends there. They used to sprint from the edge and leap as far as they could over the rocks right below them, splashing down into the sparkling water. Yes, it was dangerous, and yes, poor J.J. Pearl once shattered his knee on those rocks, but the danger gave the experience a certain extra kick. These days, J.J. walked with a slight limp, and she'd long since drifted apart from her childhood friends. She missed swimming, though. She didn't get to do a whole lot of that now. The Bentley was waiting for her, parked beside a rusty old Fiat. It stood out by a mile, but then it stood out by a mile wherever it went. "Good morning," Skulduggery said when she got in. "Well rested, are you?" I had 2 hours sleep, she said. Well, no one said being a great detective leading an action-packed life was easy. You said it was easy. I said it was easier for me, he corrected. Was that your lovely aunt's car I saw outside your house? Yes, it was, said Valkyrie, and told him about her brief run-in with Beryl. Family reunion, Skulduggery said when she had finished. Are you going? And what, leave you to stop the bad guys without me? No way. I'll send the reflection in my place, thank you very much. A reunion might be fun. Right, fun. Because I have so much fun with that side of the family. I wouldn't so much if it wasn't Mom's side. I have a laugh with them. Dad's side is just weird, you know? I do. Gordon spoke of them. Never forget, however, that you're weird too. She glared at him. I'm not weird like that. I'm good weird. I'm cool weird. Yes, he said doubtfully. Yes, you are. Shut up. But anyway, all of Dad's cousins will be there with their families, people I hardly know, and, of course, Beryl and Fergus and the Toxic Twins. And it's pretty much going to be horrible, so there's no way in hell that I'm going. Well, that's good enough for me. Skulduggery started the engine, and Valkyrie sat low in her seat as he pulled out onto the road and started driving. So have you found out anything about Vengius? One of our people at the docks hasn't reported in yet, Skulduggery said. He was wearing his usual disguise, wide-brimmed hat, over large sunglasses, fuzzy wig, and a scarf wrapped around the lower half of his face. It might be nothing, but Vengius might already be here. Well, yeah. That's bad. It's not good. They were driving down Main Street, and Valkyrie glanced out as they passed the bus stop. 5 bored-looking teens stood in school uniform. My reflection's not there, she said with a frown. Maybe it got delayed. She shook her head. It left before me. The Bentley slowed. What do you want to do? It's probably nothing. It could have cut across the green, although it should still have made it here by now. But no, it's probably nothing. Skulduggery pulled over to the side of the road and tilted his head at her. You use the reflection a lot more than is recommended, he said. You ought to expect some unusual behavior every now and then. I know. But you want to go and look for it, don't you? I just want to check that everything's all right. I'll get out here, go through the green. I'll turn around, head back to the pier, and meet up with you there. Valkyrie nodded, made sure no one was looking, and then got out of the car and ran between 2 buildings. She climbed the fence, dropped to the grass on the other side. The green was actually a small park, an oasis of trees and flower beds, and a fountain tucked behind Main Street. It was the site of many a game of football when Valkyrie was younger. She could have been overreacting. Her reflection had probably met some people Valkyrie knew. In fact, Valkyrie herself could be the one to ruin things by running straight into a situation that the reflection was handling with its usual efficiency. And then she heard her own scream. Valkyrie left the main path, running towards the small clump of trees. Beyond the trees near the fountain, there were 2 figures struggling. It was her reflection, trying to break free from a man in black. Hey! The man in black looked up. He was pale and oddly beautiful and way too calm. There you are, he said. I was almost fooled. Almost. But this one doesn't feel fear. And I can smell fear. He thrust the reflection from him, and it stumbled to its knees. Get to school, Valkyrie told it. The reflection nodded, picked up the fallen school bag, and ran past her through the trees, not even glancing back at the attacker. Valkyrie glared. Who are you? How did you find out where I live? I followed you, he said. I lost you when you came into town. so I decided to wait around until you showed up again. I even made some new friends." Now she saw them, a young couple walking towards her. She knew them. She didn't know their names, but she'd seen them around, holding hands, laughing. They weren't laughing now. They were pale as the man in black. They looked sick. There were bloodstains on their clothes. They watched her with dark, dead eyes. Valkyrie looked at the man in black, remembered the graceful way he had moved. "You're a vampire," she breathed. "And you are Valkyrie Kane, and you're coming with us." She couldn't fight them. There was no way she was even close to being ready. So she ran. The young couple were after her, sprinting, feet thudding on the grass. She kept ahead of them. She didn't even have to look back. She could hear how close they were. But she couldn't hear him. The man in black was running at her side, moving without effort. She tried to duck away, but he reached out a lazy hand, his fingers closing around her arm, and stopped suddenly. She jerked to a painful halt. She swung a punch, but he moved slightly and her fist connected with nothing but air. She tried to kick and he took a step, the expression on his face never going beyond bored. And he grabbed Valkyrie's arm and twisted it behind her back, and her knees hit the ground. "The Baron wants you alive," he said. "Bear in mind, he did not specify unharmed. Do not try to hit me again." "How about me?" Skulduggery said as he ran up behind him. "Can I hit you?" The man in black released Valkyrie and turned too late to stop Skulduggery's fist from smacking into his jaw. He staggered and Skulduggery splayed his hand. The air rushed into the vampire and sent him backwards, head over heels. Instead of sprawling onto the grass, however, his body moved with an inhuman agility, and he twisted sideways and landed on his feet. "Detective," he murmured. "Dusk," Skulduggery said. "It's been a while. Still evil?" The man called Dusk smiled. "When the mood takes me." He gestured to the young couple. "Allow me to introduce you to my friends. I like to call them Minion 1 and Minion 2. You can decide among yourselves which one is which." The young couple attacked. Skulduggery dodged their clumsy grabs and threw them into each other's way. Dusk blurred, and in an eye blink, he was beside Valkyrie, pulling her to her feet. Skulduggery lunged at Dusk, and they went down, and Skulduggery lost his hat and scarf. Valkyrie stumbled back. Minion 1, the male, snarled and came at her. He looked even worse close up. His eyes were dull and red-rimmed, and she could see the bite on his neck beneath his shirt collar. It wasn't the dainty two-pin pricks she'd seen in movies. His neck had been savagely torn open. She could smell the dried blood on his skin. It smelled of copper. For a moment she panicked. Her hands were gripping her collar, forcing her back, and he was strong. His girlfriend, Minion 2, was right behind him, eager to inflict some damage of her own. Valkyrie made herself relax, remembering the drills she'd run with Skulduggery and Tanith, conditioning her body to relax when every part of her wanted to scream. She allowed herself to be pushed back. Her left hand gripped Minion 1's wrist, and her right hand came up between his arms to his face. She planted her left foot and dug in and twisted her hips into him, and Minion 1 collided with her and went over. Minion 2 snarled and punched and Valkyrie's world rocked. She deflected the grab that followed, tried a lock that didn't work, then stomped on Minion 2's knees and shoved her away. She saw Skulduggery in Dusk. Now that he could no longer be taken by surprise, Dusk's supernatural grace and athleticism were keeping him away from Skulduggery's strikes. He swept out of range of the punches and kicks, and every hold Skulduggery tried. Dusk eased out of before it was even completed. He kicked Skulduggery and moved backwards, and as he did so something fell from his pocket. He glanced at it and moved to retrieve it, but Skulduggery held out his hand and it flew into his grip. It was a syringe filled with colorless liquid. Dusk shrugged. "You can keep it," he said. "I've got plenty more." The minions were regrouping. Valkyrie clicked her fingers and failed to ignite a spark. She tried again, and this time she felt the heat of the friction. She focused, curled her hand, and let the energy pour from the center of her body into her arm, into her palm. Then she took the spark and made it into a flame. "Stay back," she warned. The minions didn't answer. She didn't even know if they were capable of answering. The flame expanded into a ball of fire in her hand, and she hurled it right at them. And then Skulduggery was shouting something and running forward, his arms sweeping up, and a rush of wind hit the fireball and knocked it off course, even as the flames extinguished. Then he was at Valkyrie's side, holding her arm, walking backwards with her as the minions stalked them. "They've been infected," he said, "but they're not lost. Not yet. We don't want to kill them." Dusk strolled after them. "It's not their fault I chose them after all." Skulduggery glanced at her. "It takes 2 nights for an infected to become a vampire. Until then, they're innocent victims." "But in 2 nights," Dusk added, "this will all be over." Skulduggery took out his gun, aimed it straight at Dusk. The minions stopped and snarled. Dusk's smile never left his face. "This is your chance to leave," Skulduggery said. "Why would we do that? You're the ones backing away. You can't kill my friends. You are losing this little altercation." Skulduggery thumbed back the revolver's hammer. "I said we don't want to kill them. I didn't say we won't." "If you fire that gun," Dusk said, "you'll have the whole town running to see what's going on. And you've dropped your disguise." "That's the only reason I'm not putting you out of your misery right here and now." Dusk considered his options and shrugged. "Minions," he said, "we're leaving." The infected couple snarled their displeasure, but did as they were told. They joined Dusk as he backed away. Skulduggery didn't lower his gun. "Tell Vengius I expected more from him. Going after my colleague to get to me is the sort of thing Serpine tried. Tell him if he wants me, then be a man and come and get me. The Baron is an honorable man. The Baron is a coward." Dusk smiled, but didn't respond. Valkyrie stood by Skulduggery's side, and they watched Dusk and his minions fade into the cover of the trees. So, that is the end of Chapter 6. And that raises a question for me, because was Dusk the guy that we didn't know of? Well, I guess because Dusk had the syringe that we were introduced to with the guy that Vengius was talking to. Because something about a mutation or something. But it would seem that Dusk is a vampire, as we found, and he has taken a couple as his minions to hunt down Valkyrie. But why? And why does Vengius want Valkyrie alive? No idea. But hopefully we find out. But until then, I'm going to leave this one here. So thank you guys so much for listening to this one. If you liked it, you know what to do. Keep things crazy, and I'll see you guys in the next one.